There's a young boy walking through obstacles, cut up from all the surgery, prosthetic picture perjury, telling me I'm normal, but normal they never really made me see. They always painted me, discriminated but levitated through all the hated scenes. So I redrew how they made it seem. But that's what you feel around vultures and all the fatal schemes. They wanna label me a cripple, that's the way it seems. Take away my right to pursue a normal life and live.
Indeed, for me, I must proceed and shine bright like the sun. Even though I know the darkness will come, it's all temporary. I can be legendary, cause I will never stop believing in me. It doesn't matter what you think I should be. See, I am what I am, I'm the truth. I'm disabled, I'm amazing, understand. Don't you ever underrate me, cause I got a second chance, and I choose to be the greatest in whatever the plan is. All my life, right? I ignite like a kaboom when I step in the room, so please don't get...
Welcome. How are y'all on this, well, it's kind of a gloomy December 6th day, 2025. Let me introduce myself. My name is Lutisha Andre Doucette, and let me give you a self-description. I'm just going to call this recovering from surgery tired chic. I am in like a lavender velour set, sparkly star glasses, dark navy blue lipstick, and what I like to call my Becky with the good hair earrings. They're like these silvery fringe earrings. And I am still honey skin colored, Black person. And I want to thank you for joining us for this town hall on accessible sports in society, also called ACES, because we like acronyms, and that's a really long thing to say. I'm joined here with the president of Soul Touchin Experiences, and he's won an Emmy Award. I've seen it, y'all. She is very shiny. She's very cute. And his name is Keith Jones. And we have our wonderful and talented OBS operator, Maya Mama, who is doing all the cool graphics and setup that you can see on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitch. So feel free throughout this whole entire process, put in your comments in the chat, ask us questions. We're going to be talking more because you're like, what is ACES? And I swear we're going to talk about this, okay? Things would not go. I don't know what I would do without Maya Mama, though. She's such a joy to work with, and hire her for your streaming needs. Okay? So before we have Keith introduce himself, I want to tell you a little bit more about ACES. It's an upcoming initiative, again, with Soul Touchin Experiences in partnership with Sports Integrity Global Alliance, also known as SIGA, Autistic Women Non-binary Network, and so many other fantastic partners, and is funded by the Ford Foundation. Thank you so much, Ford, for the money. Yay, go Rebecca. ACES will engage disabled youth, especially Black disabled youth, by creating a pipeline of new experiences and opportunities at the intersection of sports, arts, and technology. So our robust programming will develop leadership skills with a leadership academy based off of my book, Cultivating an Intersectional Mindset. We're going to be giving access to mentors with the help of SIGA and show youth the variety of careers available to them within sports and just so much more. There's also a mental health component that we have, as it's important to support our youth in all aspects of how they're showing up in the world, especially with some of the heavy topics that we have to talk about and what we will face as leaders, both as youth leaders and adult leaders, as we all know in this room. And I'm the project manager for this project. And I truly believe that now more than ever, our disabled youth need concrete skills of leadership to usher forth the society that we wish to see in the world. No more telling just our sob stories. No more just being reactionary. We're going to prepare our children, our children, to be the ones who know how to be proactive, to face the issues that they're going to be experiencing both now and in the future. I know you'll all want to know more, so throughout today's conversation, Maya Mama is going to drop links in the chat or put it on screen with our mailing list so that you can join us for future events, or if you know of any Black disabled youth who wants to join when we open up for recruitment, just let us know and we'll keep you on the list. We also want you to donate. Just because we got money from Ford, don't mean that we can't have more money. We want more money, y'all. Running this kind of show, we want to have money to have like interpreters, to be able to support mods and things like that. So this is what we would like to keep us being sustainable moving forward. And speaking of interpreters, shout out to the interpreters who couldn't be here today because they got sick. So please stay vaccinated. Don't forget to mask if you can. Keep our community safe in all ways. All right, that's enough of me talking. I talk a lot. So Keith,
Yes.
you give us a self-description of yourself and tell us how you came up with ACEs, because I know you've been cooking this up for a while.
Well, first of all, thank you, Letitia, for being the host and the partner. Thank you, Maya Mama, for doing all the amazing behind-the-scenes work. My name is Keith Jones, President and CEO of Soul Touchin Experiences, LLC. I'm an African-American male wearing glasses with a 13 o'clock shadow and wearing a black hoodie. And you have to forgive me, I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm going to try to be as energetic as possible. One of the reasons we cooked this up, the journey has been an interesting one, to say the least, but one of the goals was always to attack a problem that our community has had forever, which is how do we give youth an on-ramp to a larger, inclusive life? What does that look like if you're in the Deep South? What does that look like if you're in the rural parts of the country? What does that look like if you're in countries where disability is seen as a cultural curse? So the goal of ACEs, or Accessible Sports in Society, is to use the intersection of sports, entertainment, and technology as an on-ramp to learning leadership skills, to learn how to live inclusively within your community, particularly because access has always been a particularly challenging issue when it comes to socioeconomic standards. And so what we thought about when we cooked this up years ago was taking the advantage of the World Cup coming to the United States and using soccer as well as other forms of sports to teach the various aspects of what career paths can look like. A lot of people talk about sports in terms of athletics or teams. We want to make sure that our youth have access to the entirety of it. What does it mean to be a sports manager? What does it mean to be a sports lawyer? What does it mean to do what Maya Mama is doing? What does it mean to do what Letitia is doing? What does it look like to have a role model of people who you may not ever see on TV or in places, literally show you that yes, somebody gave you an IEP, but that is not definitive of who you are. Yes, you can, if you're really good at playing NBA 2K, that you can actually use those skills to learn how to build a video game. What does it mean to learn how to code? How do you learn intellectual properties? So we thought about this as a very holistic standpoint, but more importantly, with our partners through Trinity Digital and Satori and Block Survey, as well as through framework on your Leadership Academy, how do we make sure that we give people the emotional support? Because it's different when people say, oh my God, you guys can be athletes, but they don't talk about the stressors of what does it mean to be a child with a disability who wants to step out of this narrow box that people have put you in. How do you react when you are the anchor of somebody else's existence, but it depends on you keeping yourself in these narrow confinements of eligibility requirements, income limits, access to education. So we really wanted to take sports, leadership, mentorship, not just to give these kids, everybody you can be a leader, but really show this is what you could be if you have the appropriate sports, if you have the appropriate network around you. So that's kind of the ethos. But at the core of it, to be fun. to have a good time. Like sports is, yes, healthy competition. But I remember being a kid and playing kickball when I had really good knees. It was fun, but it was also a way that you could see somebody's humanity beyond their human condition. And that's what we are really trying to do here with ACEs.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. A lot of nuggets in that, y'all. You know, when we think about sports, you touched upon that it's not just about, being a competitor, right? We
Right.
always think about being, the athlete. I'm going to go to the Paralympics, but I don't know if y'all know, audience. I'm here in Rochester, New York, closer to Toronto than it is to New York City, y'all. Uh, like a rural, suburban, small, mid-sized city kind of a place. And Keith has experiences in Ithaca, and here, you was going to participate whether you was disabled or not. Especially in archery.
Right.
Yeah, you
Oh,
know,
God,
and
yes.
it showed me how inclusion works. No one was saying like, "Oh, this is inclusion," right? They was just giving you that bow and arrow, and we're gonna figure it out so you can shoot that bow and get that arrow to the target. We're just gonna do what it do, and everyone was just really invested and people participating. But we don't see that in society at large. Can you tell us why? Your thoughts as to why we don't have that level of adaptability and inclusion in the broader context of our society.
Well, in the broader context, it's funny you mentioned. It's funny. It's, of course, everybody and their mama call at the wrong time, even with the phone on Do Not Disturb. You gotta love it. One of the things that we talked about in terms of inclusion in the larger society is, I'll just walk you through my timeline. I'm Gen X, y'all. So that means into the 60s, early 70s. And what we didn't see in the 70s and the 80s was a strive to make sports for all students. So when we did archery, and when you mentioned Ithaca, they wanted me to do fencing, which is hilarious to me. And they gave a black man with cerebral palsy a sword. I thought it was comedy. But one of the things was, it was okay. The teachers didn't care. They just wanted you to participate. But it showed, depending on the luck of the draw, you either got somebody who was willing to just see you for who you are and then figure everything out, versus we built entire industries on specifically your disability for these things, which is great. It's needed, but that's not how society works. The large, particularly for youth who are Black and brown, and particularly for urban and rural youth with disabilities, you needed to be in the pipeline to have those kind of access points. And so one of the impetus of this was taking those fortunate experiences of being able to be in upstate New York and go ice skating. In St. Louis, wasn't nobody taking you from the middle of St. Louis to go to the ice skating rink because racism, classism, ableism. There was no chance for young women to just play a game because people thought women couldn't compete with men in a game. So you are facing all of these layers of socioeconomic divisions and perceptions around your humanity. So we wanted to use the things that the kids could access most: fun, entertainment, gaming, and give them that backbone to say, yes, even though you don't see yourself in this, you can be that reflection for somebody else. And so that's kind of why we took it this way. And again, the realities of this project is we are not devoid of what the larger socioeconomic environment is. Youth with disabilities, particularly now here, are under an unprecedented assault in terms of the way educators see them, the way, the terms of just if you're developing in puberty, your gender identity, your relationship identity. What does it mean to be independent within a family where you have been dependent all the time? How does that work? And what are the outlets when you don't have somebody who looks like you to talk to? So we really wanted to take all of that into consideration and build this thing. So when they go through the Leadership Academy, they get skills to go back into the community to build that community. What does it look like to say, no, I don't want to be a basketball player, but I want to be the lawyer? What does it say? I don't want to be, the team manager. I want to be the coach. And so how do you give those basic on-ramps to those opportunities, and using sports, particularly soccer or basketball or esports, as that on-ramp? And that's kind of what's the impetus to that. When you talked about the archery, the funniest thing in the world is me holding a bow and arrow at the age of 9 and going, what in the am I supposed to? And then when I hit the target, was crazy. So that really is the beauty of youth, is that you give them the opportunity to expand their horizons. Their imagination is limitless.
No, it's so true. I was feeling like that same feeling, because I remember that first time they gave me a bow and arrow, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And they're like, well, why do you think you can't do that? Instead of
Right.
thinking that you can, and it's about breaking out of your own kind of mindset that ableism can put you in,
Yeah.
As a young person, because, you're so used to always being put in a box as a disabled person, especially as when you're kind of like the only one,
Yes.
right? I was the only Black disabled kid, in
Mhm.
a wheelchair, even though we had other kids with disabilities. There wasn't anyone who looked like me. And some of the best leadership skills that I have learned are from fencing. I fence at, shout out to Simi and Kiri Akiti over at Luda's Fencing Studio. Some of the greatest leadership lessons I have learned from fencing, right? And thinking outside of the box. And we use technology. My hands be like this. How am I supposed to hold a sword?
Right.
Then he crafts something so that I can hold a sword, right? So you could even be the adaptive person. You could be, what is it? The Raiders have their own seamstress.
Right.
That's her whole job that she never knew existed. That she makes the custom jerseys for all the players because they big dudes. And so she makes things so that it's comfortable. So you
Right.
can use your skills in the arts to be able to have a variety of different roles that you may not have known existed. Like you said, that kind of expands your mind and gives you all those different opportunities, which is what we want to bring to the children.
Yes. And when you speak about it, and the other part that I hope people come away with this project is that we are not just talking about the kids. We are talking about the entirety of the community. Our participants are anchor points. And one of the things, in speaking with Rebecca Coakley, again, shout out Rebecca and the Ford Foundation for trusting us with this project, was really about how do we give the kids the leadership skills to go back and to rebuild their own communities. One of the terms we were talking about is reinventing gentrification, right? Like, typically we talk about upward mobility for our youth, and people see them getting up and out of their neighborhoods as versus being the architects of rebuilding their neighborhoods. And so part of the structure of this is the youth will go through the Leadership Academy and then get to use those skills in hosting these town halls and bringing the community together. What does it mean to have a grandmother who loves you, but understands the fear of, if I turn my baby loose on these streets, are they coming home? Like, there's a lot of things that go into, yes, we want our kids to be running or rolling or whatever, e-gaming, all of these things, but they do not exist in a vacuum. So how do we make sure that we equip you with the skill set to understand that, but more importantly, take those skills and apply them in your own community so that you can start that rebuilding process of that. If you want to be successful, doesn't mean you gotta leave. It just means your success is, hey, we have a neighborhood center now where if we didn't have it last week, now we got it now. And that kind of reinvestment and reinventing of youth energy back into their community really is my secret mission, is to give the community strong leaders, give the kids and the families hope beyond okay, you got IEP, let's get you to 22 and get you on benefits. Here's a path to a career, a business, a lifestyle that is not defined by us, but it's defined by your dreams, your vision, your hopes, and your wishes. And here's a lattice structure of skill sets and emotional supports through Satori with our emotional support app, and understanding that by gaining our information through Block Survey and understanding through help with Trinity Digital how to expand this footprint as well as through FTA Media. So what does it look like in the virtual space? And so as we do these things, even now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm kind of excited about it, but I know, baby, I know we, it's gonna be a road, but I think the kids are ready. The kids are ready.
They definitely are ready. I feel like, I work with the Lego First Robotics kids here. And last year, one of the kids built me a little robotic wheelchair. And that's something that they probably had never considered before. Or even in their project, they made sure that there was an elevator that they built into the project. So to understand that accessibility can be put in from the ground up, right? And the kids are learning that this is not something extra that you do. It's something that is part of the process, right?
Okay.
And seeing themselves within that process. So that leads me to the next question.
Yes.
How do you approach accessibility within this project and what you do in your work?
So thank you for the question. One of the things that we talked about, we were very, very, very intentional in building out this project, and in speaking to the funder, and speaking to the partners, where this is from the human out. So a lot of people like to talk about accessibility as an add-on or an addendum to, versus being integral and intentional. So there is a what we call loosely a take pack. Recruit the kids, they get their little, ooh, I got the fancy stuff. But really it's based upon how can we make this as accommodating for you to participate as fully as you see fit in the process, versus, okay, here's some things and if you get it, you get it. And so we approached accessibility one from a needs-based assessment. And it's not this antiseptic, well, what is your range of motion, or, what's your speech? It's what do you need? How do you adapt to the circumstances? Because, and to use myself as an example, I use my feet. So when I'm playing video games on PlayStation and I'm beating my son at NBA Live when he was a kid, I didn't have a special controller, but I had a system that I cooked up for myself, which may not necessarily work for another person with cerebral palsy who might have use of their feet or different extremities in terms of that. So one of the other parts is, how do we use current eye gaze technology, adaptive equipment, speech to text? There are a lot of things that are there, but more importantly, engaging the youth and saying, what do you need for you to do this? What are the best ways you see fit to, to participate in a virtual town hall? How do you need to, log on? What does it look like to play NBA Live or FIFA 2026 on PlayStation? Or what does it mean to develop your avatar in a virtual space? And a lot of those challenges, as much as we can be thinking forward, we really are thinking forward with the understanding that we don't know everything, and that youth are the best experts about themselves. And so really having a trust, we have a baseline of, clearly adaptation, as you can see here, live speech to text, translation, things like that, and the realization that life happens. And so the flexibility of our technology is to say, if it's easier for you to speak, let's do that. If it's easier for you to use ASL, let's do that. If it's easier for you to have an assistant or a person with you who can do certain things for you, let's do that. The goal is not making the accommodation the golden standard. The golden standard is, are you participating to your fullest ability the way you see fit? And that really has been the way we've approached adaptation and accessibility, because, you know, one of the things we talk about is when people hear technology, they have a certain vision of technology, but technology is also cultural. So what does that mean if you are, you know, a phone book, duct tape, and an upside down controller? Is technology to me. And that's how I played Madden NBA, you know. And so for somebody else, it could be eye gaze, it could be speech to text, it could be, you know, sip and puff hand controls. So that's how we are trying to be as holistic in terms of accessibility, by not pinning ourselves to these rigid frameworks, but to giving kids the ability to define their own level of accessibility.
That is beautifully put, you know, putting things in the way people don't think about accessibility as contextual. They think of this is Americans with Disabilities Act.
Right.
You have to check these boxes. And oh well, you know, sucks to be you if it's outside of that, right? Like, or you'll have, you know, able-bodied panic when they can't really, their brains melt because they don't know how to shift or accommodate when, you know, things happen, right? Look at the many ways that we have had to shift and accommodate. I'm recovering from surgery, looking like death warmed over still.
Right.
With glitter, y'all, just with glitter. And you're sick, but you know, we had to shift because we had to accommodate our needs in this moment, right? So really thinking about the fact that accessibility is also adaptability and flexibility. That's included in that term that most people just don't really think about. So thank you for highlighting that for us today. I got more questions though.
Okay. Okay.
But y'all, as we go along with this conversation, please feel free to engage. Even if you are watching the recording afterwards, put your comments in the chat. We actually will be looking at them and we'll probably bring it up in the next town hall. So make sure that you're engaging, you're sharing, you're liking, you know, give us all the love. I know it's a Saturday. We only got a few weeks till Christmas. And maybe y'all are like me, tired. So think about, you mentioned earlier about like having the youth being able to shape their own communities, not leaving the community, but shaping right where they're at. So how does community shape the work that you do?
How does community shape the work that I do? Community really is the work that I do. And I'm fortunate in the community shaping my work because I, being one of the generations that predated the ADA, predated the Handicapped Children Education Act, literally being older than them repealing the ugly laws. Like it literally is community because, and by virtue of being Black in America, community is at the core of our existence because of how society has deemed our human condition. So if you're 6 years old and they're repealing the ugly laws and now you can go to school, you know, people forget that, you know, or now when you're having people in the disability community realize that with the quote unquote dismantling of the Department of Education, all of these things that literally happened within my lifetime, literally within the last few decades, has shown me that our communities need voices that are anchored in not just, oh, that's an issue, let's organize and rally, but why are you rallying? Like, why are we fighting for better education for our youth? It's so that you don't have to, you know, be trained to be a leader because your community has forgotten that your church doesn't have a ramp, so you can't go to Sunday service. Or that when we do have our Juneteenth celebration, we're putting it in a park, in the middle of the park where there are no wheelchair paths. And when you get to the when you do get to cook, you're stuck in that one spot. Or, you know, Right? They're like, often, and typically I sit next to where they start to get the first one to get a plate, but that's neither here nor there. But the community really is, there's two sides to this. It's not just informing the community, but reminding that the community, that we are the community. So a child with a disability is not just a child with a disability. It's just their son, their daughter, their brother, their niece, their cousin, their uncle, their parents, their fathers. And so shifting the separate and apart from into we are part of is really how the work in the community has been driving by me, has set me on this path where, like, you should have the option of walking out of your door or getting out of or rolling out of your door, however you get outside, that the only reason you can't participate is because you don't want to, not because there are inherent barriers predicated upon your gender identity, your human condition, or the way you speak, or your sensory issues. It's really how, again, the ethos is how do we center this in your humanity? How do we make sure that our community is driven by nurturing our humanity, nurturing those ties, nurturing the development of these youth, and giving them a better outcome than society has predetermined them to have.
Well, he preaching today. That's all I have to say. You said so much, and I think about when I first came to Rochester. Before that, I was in Yuba City, like Marysville, California area, very rural, y'all. That's what we had buttes, but nobody was taking me up the buttes. You know what I mean? So the access to the outdoors was something that was very new, but it's intrinsically part of the culture here in Rochester. Going to parks, going into the Erie Canal, going into the Genesee River. And what I noticed was a huge divide, a racial divide. It was white people who was like, "Nah, you can get in the water." And I was like, "I don't know. Folks don't really work out too well for Black folk in the past, with y'all." And a lot of trust, right? From a cultural perspective. I remember when I took some Black folk, we were doing a photo shoot and we were doing some scouting, and we went out and she was like, "Do you trust this white man to help you into this?" I've been knowing him since I was 11 years old. He knows I'll throw him in the water. He's like, that is true. But there's a lot of trust culturally, cross-culturally, with our disabled children, let alone, our Black disabled children. You're gonna tell these parents, yeah, that white man's gonna put him in the boat.
Right.
And we're gonna go where you can't see.
See us.
50 miles down the Erie Canal. And you gotta trust that they're gonna bring your kid back to you in one piece, right? Because there's that fear that a lot of disabled, parents of disabled children have, that what if my kid gets hurt? And a lot of times sometimes in sports, that's a badge of honor. You hurt yourself, right? And you got through it. So, you talk about how community shapes, but also different communities are going to be different because of the racial divide that we see, because of segregation. When you talk about access, right, earlier, I was in Fairport. That's not the same level of access as city of Rochester, because not just because of the topography, the Genesee River is pretty fast, 40, 50 miles an hour, top speed. You might not want to be throwing disabled kids in kayaks.
You might not.
For the first time, doing that. And so really thinking about the larger implications of leadership of okay, now here we have to go speak to our politicians, our city engineers, and be collaborative partners in order to make things accessible in a way that people can actually access. What does that even look like? That continues to be an ongoing discussion here because of some real engineering challenges, but those are great challenges to try to overcome. And the youth can be a part of that discussion as well. So this is how we can change the mindset, not just of ourselves, but our whole communities, right? Fairport now has an all-inclusive kayaking and hand cycling center. And over the past 30 years, I've just seen the shift in people in Fairport, seeing disabled bodies existing, not just existing as we off to the side, have to pick out, but participating in a way, and people are asking questions. I've never seen that before. What is that? I didn't know you could do that. Then they bring in their disabled family members and oh no, you can do that. And that's what we want to bring to our communities, to our youth. Sports is it's just a door, y'all. And we're going to open it to all different types of opportunities. And hopefully we will see y'all in 2026. We tired, as we have said multiple times on this live. And thinking about tiredness is just, small crew working on this, trying to stretch those funds from the Ford Foundation as far as we can go. My last question for you is, what do you think about sustainability for this project?
That is all I think. That is, I'm gonna take the creative prerogative, I guess. Lord, look, keep us going. No, no, really, one of the keys is we have been fortunate to have partnerships such as Catalyst, such as Satori, such as Trinity Digital, such as FTA Media, such as Black Survey, and SIGA. We have great partners. And one of the things has been the very beginning is that in the Ford Foundation was that it's seed money, but this is not about doing one and done. The if I have one bane and one thing that I'm unwavering about is that we do no harm. Because what typically happens when projects come about is that it's something really great, it's grant funded, it does an amazing impact for 2 years, 3 years, and then poof. And then you get caught up in the cycle of writing grants where you have to prove that your community is as pitiful, but will benefit more so than the next community who is also being written as being underserved and pitiful and need more. So how do we get out of that, that spinning wheel of, it's a hamster wheel. It's we can do big things, but you can't do so much big things because say, well, we don't need to fund you because rich you are. And so how do you do that? So we thought about sustainability in various ways. One, with this project, is having the youth help develop a video game in which they can have a slice of IP, so it looks good on their resume, things like that, and that whatever that generates, that revenue becomes a pipeline back into the project to keep it going. We don't necessarily have an immense budget, so it's not like an unreachable goal, but sustainability is key because we want to make sure that we do not do what has always been done in our communities, which is even metastasize into the perpetual nonprofit that only does things that only reaches this many people because, oh my God, I would love to do more, but we only have LA right? And it's also a different challenge than when we started. We were dealing in a different socioeconomic and global political climate in which we were basically doing what is now be called DEIA, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility. Now, funders and people who would want to support that don't necessarily want to be couched as supporting these kind of initiatives, particularly when our communities have been demonized, ad nauseum, even before this current administration. How do you not be the pitiful Negro shaking a cup talking about, please help us? How do we make sure that the youth in our project are not seen as, in the arms of an angel commercial where you hear the song in the background? How do we do this? How do we not have to make an emotional appeal to a funder, but we can make a pragmatic appeal and say, here is what these youth will accomplish with your support, versus, oh my God, we have all of these wonderful youth, and look how glowing their faces are. See these pictures. So the challenge is really an interesting one, to say the least. But we have always been at the core that, with the support of the Ford Foundation, that we look at that as seed money to, one, perpetuate this beyond just the 2 years or 3 years, but that we use these on-ramps to soccer, to esports, to e-gaming, to the sports league as a way of being able to sustain these youth beyond grant funds and give them a real sense of what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What does it mean to be an employee? What does it mean to be an employer, right? What does it mean to be a student? And what does it mean to lead in ways that are not traditional, right? Because when you graduate this leadership academy, nobody's like, oh, here's the campaign fund, go be senator, because we know that we are not living, in the perfect world, we would get $1 million grant and we'd be good to go. In a greater world, we would have partnerships with tech agencies that would understand that these youth are going to give you the windows into the future adaptations of coding, of what is ergonomic design, what is typography design. How do you, in Seneca, in upstate New York in January, when it's negative 4,200 degrees, like how do we make sure that we have multiple ways for you to engage when the environment is hostile to your existence? How do you do that, given that we're in cold and flu season, so if you're a medically compromised participant, how do we make sure that we have taken all that into account? So the sustainability piece really has multiple parts. Yes, we will continue to seek grant funding and grant partners, but we're also talking about ways that we can generate internal revenue at minimum to keep the Leadership Academy going for the next 5 to 10 years. How do we do that in terms of partnering and how do we build out those relationships. So those will be the things going forward that I'm more interested in terms of the background, because the last thing I want is our youth and our families, our communities, to have the proverbial guillotine hanging over their head every time projects show up. We never have been able to just build something and leave it in place and never have to worry. So that's what's always on my mind in terms of what are the creative ways we can build our partnerships in order to make sure that we affect as many people in the positive way as possible.
Wow, amazing. And we do have a question from the chat. Thank you so much.
Hey,
Whoever
chat.
this is from chat. Please bring in your more questions. We would love to answer them. And so the question is, what are some of the specific skills young people will obtain because of participation in the program? I think I can answer some of this.
Yeah.
So with the Leadership Academy portion, they're going to be learning to identify, what are the components of leadership? What are the components of their leadership, their strengths as leaders? Because sometimes children don't know that they actually are leaders right now. And they have specific skills and strengths. And sometimes it's just helpful to identify that. So we'll do some skills, strength kind of identifying. We'll also be talking about what I call a power analysis. So not just understanding the power analysis in your community, right? Whether it be local, municipal, state, national, but who are you connected to?
Right.
These are kind of some of the components of my book, Cultivating an Intersectional Mindset, to be able to say, now that I've identified that I'm connected to these people, when we want to make things like more accessible, who do I talk to? How do I approach them? Maybe I need to write a proposal. Maybe I need to get some other adults involved. And we will teach them how to actually go about doing that. And they'll leave with their own kind of action plan, right?
Yes.
To identify, some of the things that they want to be doing within their community to advance accessibility. And we're also going to connect them to different mentors. Maybe they're going to be thinking about different careers. And so that then leads to, what are the skills that they need to learn? What classes can they take? They're going to give access to, there are different courses that different colleges actually provide to high school students that you don't really need any permission to take, that can get you college credit, that they can start building that now so that when they go to college, it's a little bit cheaper because you already got the credits for the courses. So then you can do that more advanced stuff and not have to have the burden of, the high burden of student loans. So those are some of the ideas that I want to bring to the youth. The secondary part of that is some of the emotional skills that they'll need to learn. We have Satori, who's going to be building on emotional wellness. Specifically for our Black disabled youth, we have emotional emancipation circles, which teach them, I hate the word resilience, right? Because our kids are resilient in the face of the nonsense that they face every single day. But teaching them some emotional regulation skills, teaching them some different ways to approach problems, what to do when they're confronted with racism, ableism, and sexism, because it's going to happen. And we have to prepare our youth for when it happens, not be reactive after it happens, and then say, now we have this whole entire thing on our hands. So giving them those tools to kind of prepare themselves for what they will experience outside of this bubble. And that was from Hollis Cotton. Hello.
Hey, hello, Hollis. And to add to that, one of these specific, the goal has always been very intentional with our partners, which is why we have Catalyst Consulting, which is why we have Trinity Digital, which is why we have Satori, which is why we have Block Survey, which is why we have FT Media. Each one of the partners brings a very specific on-ramp to the behind-the-scenes magic that is, what does it mean to be a leader? And so, yes, you get to graduate with the Leadership Academy, learn all those things, but you also then, by virtue of being in this project, become the next batch of mentors to the incoming class, junior mentor. We ask you to use these things. So when we do the community townships, they get to, so it's not theory. This is all you learn, you practice, you learn again, you sharpen, you learn again, and you practice. The goal is reinforcement as well as particular skills in terms of what does it mean to be, do I want to be a coder? Do I want to be a gamer? Do I want to be something in my IEP that my teacher may or may not have never understood? Again, our age range is 14 to 22. And that particular window particularly for Black youth, particularly for Black and brown youth, particularly for youth with disabilities across this country, have now become a pitfall of, if you don't have the quote unquote preferred diagnosis, all bets is off. So if you don't have a neurodivergent diagnosis, but you are a person who in your culture, those things don't exist. There are no, what does it mean to be Black and autistic? What does it mean to be, Black, non-binary, and have a mental health challenge, and you are facing all of these pressures to conform? Those are real things that affect how you participate in the leadership of the academy. How do you participate in the emancipation circle? How do you do a wellness app if there is if we're sitting here pretending, oh my God, we're going to do all these fuzzy things and ignore the fact that you was hungry this morning when you logged on because at your house, there was no food today. Or I'm waking up because my hormones as a teenager are all over the place. And the adults in the room seem to have forgotten that this is a reality of human development. So a lot of the tools that we hope that we're planning to give you are not just about, oh, here's a good leader and go out and lead the community. It literally is, today is a very bad day. And I do not want to get in this wheelchair again because I don't have the energy to roll down this hallway and then have to figure out how to get on the toilet, deal with the nonsense, get out. Then I got to argue with somebody who don't like there are a million things before you even get to say, today I want to be a leader. So we really are hoping, that's why the goal is human focused. We are centering on our participants, humanity, and then give them the tools, hopefully, that they can use not just for ACEs, thank you very much, but for their life and for their community and for their chosen partner if they choose that. What does it mean to be a teenager and want to, I'm 22 years old, but people still think I'm 5. Decisions around voting or smoking or not